So, hello everyone, thank you very much for coming along. My name is Tommy Small and I'm Director of Shape the Caper. We've been doing 3 weeks of research, so 3 weeks of R&D on this piece of work called No Offence. We've been funded by Creative Scotland and we've had a few partners get involved as well in the process. So we did 2 weeks back in December at the workroom in Glasgow, thanks to the residency with them. And with a slightly different cast. So we have a cast today of only Alex. Do you want to come in, Alex, and just say hello?
This is Alex, who was our trainee. So Alex, we got some funding from Creative Scotland to have a dance trainee with us for a year. And Alex was so wonderful that we've offered Alex a full-time job because she's so wonderful. So Alex is now with us as a dancer as well. And then also want to come and join us as well. So we've also got, I'll let you introduce yourself.
I'm Kirsten, I'm a BA student at the Space, so I'm just here for the week for a mini apprenticeship.
So we've got a really lovely link with the college here at the Space, and we've been looking at trying to kind of bridge gaps between people finishing training and getting into the profession and trying to find opportunities when we can, and R&D moments are perfect moments for us to be able to do that. So we brought in Kirsten, who's been really impressing us in the studio and working with us over a number of projects over the year. So Kirsten's came in to be part of this apprenticeship as well.
Hi, my name is Rob. I'm a freelance dance artist based in Newcastle, and I've been working with Shape the Caper for about 7 or 8 months now, on various projects.
So we've got lots of people watching today online as well, so thank you very much for joining us. And we've also got people in the studio that you can't see either. And we won't turn the camera around because that'll make you seasick, but we've got people in the room as well. So what we're going to do today is just show you the kind of ideas we've been working on this week. And we've picked up some of the stuff that we did back in December, but in December when we worked at the workroom, we were thinking about LGBTQ and we were focusing on the G and the Q of LGBTQ on those 2 weeks. And this time round, we've been thinking about the L, the B, and the T. So we've been trying to kind of make sure that actually we've got a real representation across the whole of this kind of community. And what we're trying to kind of find is what are the stories that are out there at the moment, and what are the things that I was wishing as a young LGBT person, who were those people I could look up to, who are those kind of role models, who are those other people that I want to hear their conversations and their stories, because I don't recognise myself in any of those stories. So we've been trying to kind of find those stories, and we found lots of different stories from people that represent the whole kind of spectrum of the LGBTQ community, and we've tried to bring some of those to life today. So just to reiterate, it's very much research and development, just 3 weeks on this part, just 4.5 days, so very much in development, and what we're hoping to do is, if it all goes successfully, we would then apply for some money to do a proper long creation period, and then tour the world to hopefully lots of lovely venues like yourself. Without further ado, we'll just get started. There's going to be an opportunity at the end as well, so people online, if you can stay on at the end, we're going to jump into a little Q&A as well. So if you've got kind of direct questions, then we can take those at the end. There'll be someone manning the live stream to ask you questions. And if not, if you need to rush off at the end, you can send us a little email as well to just yolanda@shapethecaper.com would be great. Okay, right, here we go.
Should we treat gender dysphoria as a mental disorder? Only if we treat every other human reaction to specific stimuli as a mental disorder, like happiness, sadness, anger, anxiety, fear. Sadness and depression are 2 very different things, and they're treated differently. And fear, does the presence of fear indicate that you have a a mental disorder? Does it mean that your brain is working abnormally? Or is fear a human reaction to a specific stimuli? Gender dysphoria is a risk reaction. It exists in the mind. It arises from a specific stimuli. It is an understandable reaction to those specific stimuli. And fear is a very interesting one, because when does fear cease to become a fear and become a phobia? When does it become a mental disorder? Well, the American Psychiatric Association says that the difference between a fear and a phobia is that a phobia is the experience of excessive, persistent, and unreasonable fear. Most people are afraid of creepy crawlies, spiders, snakes. And most people, such as yourself, might feel anxiety if they were placed in a situation where they were treated negatively by the opposite sex. You see, gender is very important to us human beings. We're very social creatures, and one of the fundamental ways in which we organise ourselves is via gender. When our gender is acknowledged, we can be ordered, we can be organised. But when that acknowledgement isn't there, or when our gender is dismissed or seen as false, human beings can be prone to gender dysphoria. Human beings can be prone to gender dysphoria. Human beings can be prone to gender dysphoria. Notice I said humans, and not trans people. Everyone can, including you. We can all be affected by specific stimuli. In fact, given the right circumstances, you, or elements of you, could be dismissed as false or fake. And given the right circumstances, you could feel fear if you were placed in a confined location with creepy crawlies. And because it is a reasonable reaction, it is therefore not a mental disorder. So, like I said at the beginning, should we treat mental dysphoria as a mental illness, a mental condition, a mental disorder, only if we treat every other human reaction to a specific stimuli as a mental disorder?
Yeah, but it is a disorder though. Or a mental illness. It is! Sorry. You know, it's really interesting actually that you say that, because there has been a lot of media attention recently about, you know, the gays and stuff. And they're talking about trying to teach LGBT issues in schools. And I'm just like, what issues? What's the issue? I mean, you can get married, you can adopt kids, have your own wee family. It's not like it's against the law anymore, it's just like, what are you going on about? It's so silly. And I'm totally fine with the gays. Our next door neighbour's son, he's a gay. I've been to loads of, you know, gay bars and the gay clubs. They're so fabulous. Fun, they're so fun. But I just think, you know, teaching it in schools, it's just, that's too far. That's a step too far. You know, we didn't have that in my day. All this talk about, you know, oh, you can't even say boys and girls anymore. Fine, thank you. You can't say boys and girls anymore. Now you have to use all this gender neutral and non-binary language. And it's like, that is just like, you can't say anything anymore without the thought police. Fine. It's just like, why do we want to encourage that kind of lifestyle? You know, all this LGBTQ, UVWXY, fine, I'm fine. Whatever other letters you want to add. Why do we need to do that nowadays? It's just like, it's ridiculous. If you're born a boy, you're born a boy. You're one or the other. You are one or the
to be him. He's matured and stronger, and he promises to look after me. And I think that soon that I could give my heart to unlock the body cage I've been trapped in for 20 years. Unlock the castle gates and let the night be free. Be locked. And I'm ready. I need to tell my story. Hello. I'm Hayden. I'm 20 years old and I'm trans.
I was just standing over there with my friends, and well, you know, a few of them were talking, and I was just wondering, are you two like together? Like, are you lesbians, or are you bi? I mean, I'm quite curious, so I just thought I'd come over and ask you a few questions. Have you kissed yet? And actually, do your parents know that you're together? Because I tried to bring a girl. My place once, and my mum was having none of it. In fact, I mean, I have no idea what she would say if I said I was bi. So do you stay at each other's houses? Done it yet? No, because I guess it's different for you guys, because there's nothing really to put anywhere. I mean, well, I mean, it kind of is, but I just guess it's just different, isn't it? I mean, have you done it yet? Have you done it yet? Because I mean, everybody's talking about you behind your back. You know, but I just thought I'd come over and actually speak to your face. I mean, you know, because it's a little bit embarrassing, but I actually haven't kissed a girl before. And there's a lot of pressure, you know. A lot of people make fun of me, and I just thought, if I come over and speak to you guys, you know, you're bi, and I thought maybe I could kiss two girls. You know, and everyone would think I'm cool. But you know, there's no need to ignore me. I just, you know, I'm just asking a few questions. You know, because like I said, I was still over there with my friends, and you know, I think that you're quite keen actually. So I thought I could come over here and we could, you know, start up a conversation and just get to know each other. You know, you keep ignoring me. You know, and a lot of the girls think I'm quite good looking. You know. But you know, at least I've come over here and tried to have a conversation with you. You know, everybody's over there just talking behind your back. You know, I can actually see now why they say you're so ignorant. You know, you're actually being quite rude. You know, you're not even actually that good looking.
Believe the arrogance of that guy?
plugged. I've been plugged. I've been plugged into this body, which is an incompatible computer. My operators were set up for a completely different configuration. No one knows. No one knows. No one knows how to reprogram this computer. Switching out the hardware is my only option. Believe me, if I could be reprogrammed to feel content with having this male body, I would. It would be far less painful than taking in expensive surgeries. I just wish I could redo it myself. I'm gonna keep pain. I'm gonna get expensive surgery. I just want to be normal.
So as I say, we've been working with this for all the material you've seen today. We've been working with for just these 4.5 days, and been kind of exploring other stuff before today, and I think what we've kind of got. So this is Jane on the end here, who is working with us as an animator, and Jane is from Interviews Pattern. And we've also got 2 other collaborators as well that we're working with. So we're working with Jim Sutherland, who's a composer. We're working with Janice Hart, who's a theatre designer. So we've got Jane and we've got then we'll be working with the dramaturg as well to kind of look at kind of how we sculpt the whole kind of narrative of the work. And what we're looking to do is to then spend what we're hoping to is if funding works out, timeline to work out. In an ideal world, we'll be looking looking at kind of trying to do the next phase probably by August time. We're going to try and come together for about a week to try and look at kind of ways that the kind of creative team might come together and just explore some of these ideas and work with some dancers during that period too. We'll then come back to it, we'll all go away and think about it, and then come back to it again in October and November. And then the idea is to do kind of around 6 to 7 weeks of kind of rehearsals to kind of actually craft the kind of final thing. And look at how do we kind of seamlessly weave in animation, theatre, animation, what's the language, what you're looking for. So language, animation, the sound and design, so all those things kind of support each other, and they all kind of help tell parts of the story. So we've had lots of ideas kind of at the moment about what that might look like, but obviously we're at the very beginning, so we're not quite sure what the end kind of the final product will be. But what was it, we're aiming it for young people kind of 14 upwards. And the kind of point of that is that we're trying to kind of look at working with young people, and that so it'll be a show that could work for older people too, of course, but we're trying to kind of aim it towards a kind of a teenage audience. And you know, a lot of this kind of comes from I was talking about how I went to a dinner party and met Venetia, so this is Alex obviously, but the character Venetia at a dinner party I went to, where this woman kind of made this very flippant comment about you gays are okay now, you know, I don't know what you're moaning about, you know, and it's really interesting, you know, in that kind of social environment where she felt like she was able to just kind of say whatever she wanted, and you know, and it was just so painful hearing kind of that, you know, that point of view, and this was a good kind of probably about a year ago or something now, and it's interesting when you look at society at the moment, kind of, you know, falling apart, you know, with things like Brexit and Trump, and you know, and then you know, you wake up, it feels like you wake up on a daily basis to a new horror about how human beings are just falling apart. And one of the things that, you know, we've been reading about this week while doing this research was that last week we were hearing about schools in England with the No Outsiders programme, and looking at question time, asking, is it morally acceptable to talk about LGBT issues in schools with 5-year-olds? And you know, and we were kind of talking about, well, you know, if you reframe that question as, is it morally acceptable to talk about heterosexual relationships? And we were just thinking, it feels like now is the time to kind of tell the story. It feels really important to kind of tell the story right now. Before hopefully things get worse. But you know, so we kind of read that last week, and then this week we come into the process, and we're hearing about in Brunei, I don't know, you say Brunei or Brunei, you know, and hearing about, you know, the horrific things that were then legalised on Wednesday about stoning gay men in particular, but stoning gay men to death. And subjecting lesbian women to whipping as well. You know, and you just think it's just bonkers where we seem to be heading. And thinking about, you know, in Saudi Arabia, gay people are beheaded, you know, thrown off buildings. You know, so I just think that whole thing about how suddenly humanity out there, you know, all that kind of disregard for humanity is, you know, arriving kind of here, and is, you know, has always been here, but just it's becoming prevalent again, that kind of that mindset about intolerance and not accepting people who are different from you. So, and I think it just really troubles me and worries me to think that with people like Trump there and Brexit in the line of where we're going, that actually what happens to minorities, what happens to people like us, in the event of all these horrific things happening in the world, you know. So I feel like it's really important that actually we talk to the next generation of people who are hopefully going to save us all, and be incredibly, wonderfully rounded people, you know. And it's interesting because when you talk to young people nowadays, and we do huge amounts of creative learning work in schools, and when we talk to young people, you know, are getting, they get it, you know, and somewhere along the line they learn intolerance from people. And so what we're hoping to do is to try and encourage people to not learn intolerance, and hopefully anything that kind of came through to you. It's also fine if you don't have any now and you want to share later on, that's also fine. Anything on the live stream of anyone asking? We're not entirely sure if the live stream chat feed has been set up, no.
The chat has enough power, so this is speeding for a while.
Aha.
I think we've lost
it was working till then, so I was keeping my eye on that, but yeah, that's good. Great. Yeah, so any thoughts you wanted to share at this brief moment? Yeah.
I had a few thoughts. I've got 2 or 3 actually.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a few very uncomfortable questions that are not my personal opinion. I'm very much wavelength. But I'm just thinking about very, very conservative people who have a particular view on the world, and just some of the uncomfortable things for them, and just to put it in your mind, so when you're threading it through, like issues. So two or three things for me. My father's actually a school governor of a school down south in Essex. And an issue, a lot of parents are very worried about LGBT issues being talked about, because a lot of children at that school, which is an all-girls school, in their teenage years are coming home, a lot of girls identifying as being sort of lesbian, and I think that's partly context, because you're at an all-girls school, they haven't had much interaction with people of the opposite sex. It's a very particular environment, but I think there's in that quite conservative place, there's sort of a kind of a worry there. I think another worry these people worry about is this idea of if their child was transgender and giving them drugs quite early, that means that their bodies could change later on in life and they don't know what the outcome of those drugs would be. And I think the third issue is the idea of if your child was to undergo a sex change operation, the data that is out that says people who, before they undergo that operation, are depressed, and they're still depressed afterwards, and some people want that reversed later on. Those are the three big issues that very conservative crowd sort of jumps to, and I just wanted to raise them, because then you can think about how we navigate through that. Because actually, people cling to those, but that's not the point of what you're trying to say. But I do feel that needs to be tackled head on. I talk after the show or somewhere in the work, because I do feel that children of those kind of parents in that audience may just sort of and I don't want them to. I want them to be brought through.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
No, that's really good, because it's interesting, because we've been trying to gather what are the things, it feels like this is an opportunity to go, we've got these parents in the room of those quite conservative people. This is the moment to get them. It's like, what do we need to tell them? What do we need to put out there in front of their minds? So that's really good. We can certainly think about those things in that conversation, because I think it's almost like it's where to start with all this subject matter, because I can make a whole piece just about gay men, and that's my world, that I reckon all the difficulties and all the kind of complications of the kind of legal system over the years, about Margaret Thatcher's Section 28, all those kind of things about not having an education that has resulted in a whole generation of gay men having mental health crises because of that, because they didn't understand services to connect, how to deal with their emotions or being vulnerable, and all those kind of things that have now resulted in a whole generation of gay men in particular, who are very vulnerable, and I think just as a society, it's unbelievable to think that was able to happen, and I worry about people, you look at America, when Trump came in and repealing all the LGBT legislation, and we're now back to a place again that we kind of won 10 years ago, but we're back there again, and you just think, okay, so what if Boris Johnson ended up Prime Minister, or God help us, Jacob, whatever his name is, got in, and those things, so would we be back there again? So it's, so I think there's a whole kind of question about it's like where to kind of take it, and and that's just gay men, and then there's a responsibility about looking at all of that and looking at the whole community, and I think it's interesting, because we were talking, I don't know if you, so I'm co-chairing Dundee Pride, so we set up like the first kind of Dundee Pride event last year, and as part of my role there, I went along to Trans Pride that ends up kind of moving around Scotland actually. So last year it was in Edinburgh, this year it was in Dundee just the weekend, and the local newspaper wrote this absolute terrible piece of journalism for a start, but it was trying to be a kind of a balanced opinion about trying to look at things from both points of view, but actually it didn't. And they talked about how there's young people, and it's just sensationalism really. But I was talking about, did you know there are 25 young people in schools in Dundee, in the Dundee area,
that are on blockers, you know, and then it says that means there's one in at least one in every secondary school, you know. I just think, what utter poison that you would write that, you know, and put that out there as a statement, you know, and then obviously you read the horrible trolls then online about the comments on that, you know, and you just think, there it is. That's what's wrong with society. You know, you can think it's, you know, it's that sensationalism that then leads to this kind of stuff, and that's why we end up with Brexit. You know, it's like it's that miseducation, isn't it? And I just wonder about, I think what the arts do really well is provoking thought and provoking discussion, and I think that's kind of what we want to try and do with this piece is, how do we identify what are the areas to talk about? And I think that those are three very, very good ones to talk about and for us to explore,
even if it's not present in the work, as long as there's sort of an answer for it, because you will get someone like that in the room.
Absolutely.
And I think it's important. I think another thing that you raised, and I really would love to see in the work, is so when I was at university, a lot of people asked, why are we doing stuff about women? Women have achieved all their rights. This was like mid-2000s. Showing my age. Suddenly you then get sort of like Weinstein, and you know, we were all saying at university, why are we doing all this stuff about feminism? We've kind of got our rights now. So, and then and Tea Party came in and everything, like, and that's another example of these things are really quickly eroded. And I think putting it in that global context, I think really helps reinforce that. For when you get people like this, what's her name? Valerie?
Venetia
character, and it would be great to see that threaded through the work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. If you don't mind saying as well, like, because I think it's a really good point that you've brought up, because unfortunately there are liberals as well as conservatives, or people from all walks of life who are set in their ways, and when you address a thought or a philosophy or a concept that doesn't agree with their way of life, they can shut off. So I think one thing that's been, well, for me anyway, being on the inside, and one thing that we've discussed being very important is that particularly me as a heterosexual male, I'm not in a position where I feel comfortable saying what something is, like, especially for the LGBTQ plus community. So I think it's a case of presenting things in a way that are accessible, so that people can have a space, whether you, for example, you are very conservative, where that information is presented to you in a way that's accessible, rather than being like, this is how it is and you have to change to fit this, because you'll never win a battle like that. You have to welcome people with open arms in a way that's accessible, really, rather than trying to tell them to change, because it just won't happen, unfortunately. So I think it is a fair point that you're saying.
It's funny you say that, because actually that was one thing that grated on me. It's partly because you're such a good actress and so good at being grotesque. But I actually wonder if there's ever a point that character who's very flippant about, you've got all the rights now, could be viewed with a degree of empathy in a way, because I think part of the problem is I didn't think there was enough empathy from the other side towards her, even though she's completely misguided. I don't want to keep talking, but I spend a lot, unfortunately, where my family's from is a very big sort of leave voting area, so I spend a lot of time with people who have a very particular view on the world, and I'm trying to find ways of not being sort of bring my liberal opinions and just assume they're kind of ignorant. I can understand how they feel threatened by gender issues, or threatened by one family with a different colour face to them moving in down the road, even though I'd lived in places where it was very multicultural. I'm trying to understand where that fear comes from, because the fear is legitimate, which is really relevant to what you were doing at the start. The fear is legitimate, and I think if there's a degree of sensitivity there where you show a bit of humanity in her as well, to show that it's a bit complicated, I think you could bring more people who from the other side on board. That's just my opinion.
Can I bring some?
Yes.
We have someone on the line called Kim Walker, and she says, really powerful, lovely interpretation so far. One thing that comes to mind is the idea of barriers. And the barrier of the body, of the mind, of other people's views, the barriers that you may experience yourself, the healthcare system and support, societal barriers. It is a theme you will research further.
Ooh, yeah.
Hello, Kim.
Yeah, hello, Kim. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really great statement. We've got a screenshot of that, so we know what we definitely have Kim's question next. That's actually a really good one to kind of take into the next part of the process, actually, to think about that. Because I think, we've been talking about barriers kind of both last time round and this time round, actually, about how, you know, just getting there is one massive step, you know. And I think looking at that, you know, both Alex and Kirsten's solos on the chair is, I guess, specifically looking at some of those barriers, and I think we'll definitely look kind of more into that, you know, and about that, you know, that idea of kind of, you know, I think there's a really lovely kind of story that we had from a young trans person that was talking about, forgive me, can you just remind us what it was, talking about the rib cage and breaking free from the rib cage?
Yeah, this boy's always been there and he's strong.
Yeah.
That he could be him.
Yeah. And it was like, because it was something about like taking a key to unlock the...
Yeah, a key from his heart to unlock the body cage.
Yeah, the body cage, yeah. And it was that thing about, you know, the barrier of the body feeling like a prison and feeling like, you know... And for me, I just thought that was a huge thing, so, you know, we're concerned with the body with what we do. So yes, I don't quite have an answer yet, Kim, but I think it's definitely something that we're looking at exploring, and certainly we'll, take that forward for sure. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Can I ask, like,
yes.
Venetia is based on a real character, but
the others
are more like stories that you've heard and you've just kind of interpreted.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. And then we've been working with a dramaturg, I don't know if Sheila's online, but hello Sheila, if you are. We've been working with Sheila on a few different projects now, so I think the idea would be that if everything kind of works out, we look at bringing Sheila in to kind of help us just kind of construct the narrative. And, because, you know, there's a huge, I mean, I've kind of made this style of work before where, you know, you bring stories that kind of already exists. So we've got a show about 9/11 called Within This Dust, that has, you know, found stories that we've kind of woven into a narrative. So, and I guess this piece for me is almost like, it's like the next part of that. In some ways, I feel it's connected to Within This Dust, actually. I feel like, because Within This Dust is a show about 9/11, and so it's a show about you know, the worst of humanity and the best of humanity, whilst the worst of humanity is happening, you know. And I think in a way this feels very much in tune with that world, that it is looking at the best and the worst of humanity as well. So it feels like it's the kind of next logical step. I mean, we've been saying, do we think it's a trilogy? Maybe it's a trilogy, who knows? It's a very long-winded trilogy, because we started Within This Dust in like 2008 at Wood End Barn, actually, when it was called Wood End Barn. So I think what we'll be doing is looking at how do we kind of weave those kind of stories together. And we're also hoping, if it all works out, then we'll be working with LGBTQ Scotland as well, to kind of try and work with some young people and actually have stories that we could look at using that, whether that's kind of verbatim or whether you find other ways of kind of using and incorporating kind of their words. And we're also doing, as part of the year, what we're looking to do is a year-long creative learning project, actually working with McManus Museum in Dundee, working with some young people to capture their stories that might exist as part of a wider kind of exhibition. So what we're hoping is that it would kick off at McManus to begin with, and then it would then go on tour with us. So it would be a kind of a collection of, say, 10 digital pieces that we think are probably films, and that these films would kind of would feature LGBTQ young people telling their stories and whatever they want to do that, whether that's through music. We've kind of met through a promoter that we've met on tour. They were talking about someone that they know that they'd quite like to connect with us with the project. So we're hoping that that young person would then get involved as well to tell their story through trad music. And then there's lots of other kind of young people that we've kind of met along the way as well, and we'd really like to capture their kind of story. And the idea that they could then their story can come a tour with us as well. That it's not necessarily part of the main narrative of the show, but it's very much part of the wider narrative of the show. And of course, because there'll be digital assets, that they would exist online as well, and they can be kind of distributed in lots of different ways. So,
Yeah, but that would be a kind of a wider year-long project too. We'd also met, Yolanda and I have been doing some work in care homes as well. We met some older LGBT people who were talking about, who have who kind of living with dementia, and who've been talking about that, you know, because homosexuality wasn't decriminalised in Scotland until kind of late 80s, then actually they spent a huge chunk of their life in the closet, and then ended up feeling that they were able to kind of be themselves and kind of be free for quite a short period of time before they ended up in a care home environment, which can be, because of the generation of people, the kind of viewpoints there can be quite homophobic. So they've kind of gone from a period of being in the closet, out for a very short period of time, and back in the closet again. And we wanted to kind of, because because there's dementia as well, we're kind of looking at kind of trying to capture some of those stories as well, and to try and find ways of young people and older people kind of collaborating and looking at what it was like to come out kind of 50 years apart, you know, and what those dialogues and what the difference of that is. And again, not quite sure how that will work into the main narrative of the piece, but it will certainly be part of the wider narrative, it will be part of the kind of digital exhibition as well. So yeah.
We have someone else online, someone called Louis Dale, that said, I love the piece so far. I think it would be good to explore the positives of being LGBT and belonging to our community as well.
Yeah.
The joy of finding someone like you who understands how you feel, and kind of like the life and happiness that this community can bring.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, thanks for joining us. I think, you know, it's interesting because last time round, in December, we had a whole club scene. So we actually started with this whole thing that had Madonna's hung up. Wait, I'm a massive Madonna fan. So we had this like whole section where people were on a night out, and the kind of point for the show at that point was that we were going to start in a nightclub environment, and we were going to have everyone kind of leaving and, you know, having a really good time. That, you know, Venetia alludes to, that she's been to those gay bars, she's had a great time, and we were imagining that we would, you know, recreate that environment that actually you're talking about, and then we kind of introduced Venetia's character that then kind of broke that down a bit. Into, it's no longer a safe space. And, you know, my friends and I have thought it's a sanctuary. It's like, you know, it's church. You know, it's like, it's where you go to be you, and it's the one place where you can be in communion with yourself. But we talked about how actually very early, I think it was after the bombings in 2005 when I lived in London, and that those bombings, you know, really kind of shook us about, you know, and it was a few years after 9/11, and we sat, and I remember me and my friends sitting down going, you know that we're next, we're the next community that will be attacked. And I remember us like thinking really vividly about, actually, we need to have escape plans, we need to know what to do, and I are always like, you know, if something happens, we end up, you know, I mean, you don't talk about it on a weekly basis, but there's a, you know, we've had a plan in action for about 10 years about you go back to this person's house, no matter what happens, you get home, you know, and it's just, it's fascinating to think about that place that once felt like it was a sanctuary. You almost feel like you're just waiting for it to be a target. Sorry, that went miserable. Because you can talk about joy and definitely do that for sure. Yeah. Wow, that's a disease, and you know, and it really it stayed in my head for years and years and years. My uncle came round at the weekend. They talked about casualty as well. My uncle said exactly the same words. Oh, it's a disease. Homosexuality is a disease. You know, and
that's something. It's interesting that this comes up because it obviously shows that maybe it's like a little bit more craft and a bit more work. It could be presented in a way that still, but it's a bit more digestible for audience members, so it resonates and it's something that they can take home with them. And also going back to what you said as well about hitting both sides, that obviously because I'm not transgender, it's important that I take the opinion of someone if I'm going to represent them on stage. However, like, you know, there are people that maybe don't agree with that. Like, for example, there's a lot of like Western philosophers and psychiatrists that believe it is a mental condition. But what's happening is that these people that are maybe transgender and that people that study this, there's another communication or a conversation happening between them. And this is somewhere, this is a place where like the art can maybe bridge that gap. I think, you know. So.
But it's sort of isolated though. You know, it's kind of. Because I was looking for bits of that to come back later on, and it doesn't. But again, it's a snapshot, isn't it? So I think that's kind of, because there's some brilliant lines in there as well.
If you were to see this, what would be missing? Where would you, if you could see this idea develop, what would you see in light? You know, like what do you see?
More time, I think.
More time.
Yeah, right. I think because it's really it is really dense.
Yeah.
And I think, and there was so much in it, and you were that, you know, and it was like I had to listen and I had to watch at the same time. It's like, darn, you know. So I found myself working really, really hard, and it's well worth that journey, and it's well worth travelling with you. But I kind of felt it's too fast. You know, I'm kind of trying to take it in, and there are such good lines and phrases as well that, you know, you could, because there's kind of, because that level of dialogue is, and I know it's a snapshot, but it's kind of, it's not matched, and is it?
Yeah.
But it's also a story, and I know you come back to this idea of snapshot, but that kind of, you know, is kind of sustaining that that narrative, that level of debate and or returning to it in some way.
I was kind of like you, actually, just to.
Were you panicking as well, thinking?
I wasn't panicking, but I was thinking, I'm only going to retain a third of this when I leave, and there's something I've missed, so I have to go back and see it again. But actually, I would have liked to have taken more home. I agree with you. On the club thing, quickly. So my grandfather was gay. He was arrested quite a few times, and the gay scene where he was. It was almost like the gay be a safe haven for all sorts of people in society who just didn't really fit into the mainstream, and to do with not just gender and sexuality, just in terms of the way they thought about the world as well. Back in the 60s, 70s, and later into the 80s. But what I found from my close friends, who that world has changed quite a lot, because there's a lot more choice. So if you like, say, plus size men, you can just go to a club for that. It's almost become quite siloed within itself, because there's a lot more choice. And I was thinking that thing about going back to club and the community thing, I think there's something really interesting in there about sort of in connections with people you don't expect, and then being your sort of protective layer. And I think there's something about inviting everyone in to be part of this almost life. I think is really quite nice, and I actually think within some of that has been lost in recent years. Even though lots of stuff has improved, and just wanted to make that.
It's interesting. We like I see that change as well. Like, you know, I lived in London for probably about 15 years, and in that, you know, and I come from Dundee, like that council estate just over there, and you know, coming from here, and I needed to get away, and you know, London became like, oh, you know, it was like, wow, look at this amazing place, and all these gay men, yay, and you know, but I know those places, and I think when I was going there, probably like in the 90s, then that was. It was exactly that. I mean, it was still that then, actually, about, you know, this real cross-section of people who thought quite in the world, and it probably changed a bit maybe since your grandfather's time, but in terms of that, you know, like-minded people and thinking stuff, I guess some of it is certainly there, and you can probably see that change has happened over the last kind of 10 years, probably. It's really shifted into, silos, and we're missing something a bit, actually, in that, There's always that question as well in the gay scene about, you know, because if you go to Blackpool, let's say, and you know, there's a really famous drag night there called Funny Girls, and Funny Girls, if you went to like 20 years ago, was like predominantly just, you know, the LGBT, but now it's hen nights, you know, and it's really interesting. You can't be so crude as saying, my drag queen friend said, it's quite crude, so forgive me, my drag queen said, oh, you can't swing a dick in here without it hitting a hen party. It's really funny. That's a comment. But yeah, so I guess, it's almost like a commodification of that culture, so people can kind of go and watch for entertainment. Mind with hen nights, says the girl whose friend has just organised a hen night at Gloria's drag place. But it is. I feel quite uncomfortable and feel a bit guilty about it, actually, because I do think it is a vicarious way of looking at somebody else's safe space, and I think it can be problematic. I guess is that the question is about, you know, where does the line stop? Because you want to welcome people in, but also if it's for the right reasons. And I think it is that thing. If it's about, I haven't thought about it actually like that, about looking at it. Because you know, quite often talk about, you know, in a utopia, everyone would just get along and everyone would be great. But actually, it's also then really important until we get that utopia that we do have those safe environments for people to be themselves and to not feel like you have to put a barrier up against. But oh, I feel like we should have had Prosecco while we're having this conversation.
Yeah. Can you the bit about the computer hardware? Can you talk me through that again? And
yeah.
Because there was some parts of the dance that when the 3 words dancing, and I didn't need to have that interpreter because it was very powerful, you know, in its own right. But the bit about the computer, because there was dialogue in there as well. Just talk me through that.
The dialogue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to?
The computer hardware.
So that was kind of taken from a kind of similar thread, wasn't it, from Rob's kind of version. So the version from this particular trans person that I was interpreting was that they wished that they weren't trans, and they were kind of that what it's like in terms of, you know, to have gender dysmorphia and to feel as if you are placed in the wrong body. They were queer true gender as being a hard drive, and that their body was a completely incompatible computer. So that's what was causing so they believed they believed that was the completely wrong way to be in, and that they are in this particular one they were female, and it was that they had male characteristics, and that the kind of process of having to take pills and surgeries is just, you know, it's long and it's painful and it's difficult and it's expensive. So again, it's not a very exactly an uplifting sort of interpretation, but they kind of say, you know, if they could reprogram their brain to be male, then they would choose that over having to be who they truly are. And it was kind of looking at essentially, you know, as being trans a choice, and of course we were quite unanimous that it's not, that this person's kind of viewpoint was that it's not a choice. Why would I choose to put my body through all of this? You know, if I could just kind of wake up and be happy with being male, I would much rather do that rather than have to go through everything that you go through just in order to be happy. So it was kind of using a kind of computer metaphor, like, you know, if the hard drive going into the computer is not working, so the only option is to change the hard drive to a different one, change the computer just to kind of so that it's compatible, and that was the task that we'd kind of been set was to kind of start on a chair and kind of build up the movement. So it started just kind of small and gestural, and then build up kind of as they went on.
So those oppressive forces that were played by the other two, what were they?
It kind of evolved really. I think Tommy can kind of say more.
I was imagining that, for me, I was imagining that it was hearing the stories that I've heard in the LGBT community, particularly through Pride, about this oppressive force, about whether that's parents, whether that's conservative kind of people, whether that's at school, whether that's kind of buoys, whether that's friends. So you kind of wanted to kind of play with, they're slightly ambiguous at the moment. I think I'll work out who they are, I think, once we kind of get into the thing, but there was slightly, because I think there's moments where, you know, that moment of taking the dress off and the wiping the lipstick off, for me, was a parental thing about parents not understanding their child. And in other moments, I felt like in some ways it was kind of society, like actually they were representing society, pushing you down and not letting you get back up again. So I think it was kind of multi-layered, I think, at the moment, until it worked out. Or it might stay there. We might kind of flesh and realise, no, actually it's nice that it's multimodal and that it could kind of shift, the interpretation can shift a bit. But
if I could just add on to that a little bit, we kind of played the idea that Rob was being a very physically oppressive, and and Kirsten was a little bit more passive, but kind of being on the inside, and sort of the message for me was, you know, kind of almost like the kind of like Kirsten also joining in and being really strong and really aggressive, but it was kind of like, you know, when people just don't do anything, when they're just passive and just let things happen, that can be just as damaging. To just kind of watch someone be kind of, you know, really physically oppressed, and I thought that certainly from the inside, being in that character, you know, I pissed off at Kirsten, like, why not helping me, you know? So I think it was, and there was kind of times when it felt almost like sometimes when I was on the chair over, and then Rob had his hand like on my stomach. I always felt like that was like a friend saying like just don't bother, because it wasn't really strong, but it was just kind of trying to keep me where I am in safety before I fell off the chair. So from being on the inside, there was kind of various kind of characters almost that I was getting, but definitely kind of physically oppressive force as well as the kind of passive, but just as dangerous.
There's like also like other ways as well. Like I know like I don't like to label myself with whatever I am. Like I'm very open. Or I like, and my mum and dad have a really passive way of like making me feel a bit crap about it. Like, oh, are you straight again? Or are you a lesbian again? Bye. But they do it and then they laugh, and it's like really hurtful. And they think they're just having a bit of fun, but it's not funny to me, and that really hurts my feelings. And it's like a way of people do it all the time, and like it's okay not to box yourself into a category.
Yeah.
Like that, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's that thing we talked about this week about sexuality being on a spectrum and feeling like people have kind of got that in some ways, got that, but not everyone has. But it feels like in lots of ways, gender on a spectrum, people really struggle with. And I think that it's a really interesting thing. And again, as society kind of shifts and change, that it's interesting to feel like we can come back to that mindset again. Okay, well, we thought we opened our minds about gender being the spectrum, but all right, we haven't again. So it's interesting just kind of looking at kind of where we are in the world right now at this particular moment in time when things are crazy. That we'd be back at that place. But and it's interesting as well. Like I met all these kind of quite young, people like kind of 12, 13 at the weekend, and they were so, it was actually a really beautiful thing to be part of Trans Pride, to see so many young people just being there, whether they were trans, where you identified in the kind of LGBTQ spectrum. It was quite, in all the horror of the world, it was quite uplifting to actually see young people actually really be there for each other. Actually, there was something about that was really quite beautiful, and I did think to myself, I need to not forget that actually, and kind of make sure that is. So I guess that's the kind of hope that we're talking about, the uplifting about people, being there for each other. So, Okay. Well, thank you very much, and it will be.